machine?
No. So if we're going to talk about how women can have more opportunity and individuality over in capitalism, that's one argument. And then talking about how women can be fully liberated from the constraints of capitalism is a different argument.
Well, okay, let's talk. If you want to dice them up, I'm willing to like dice arguments up as small as you want to make them, or as large as you want to make them. So we can go as granular as you want.
Well, I'm just saying it's two different lanes,
Or we
and it
can
seems you can be combining it as one.
Okay, but what's the goal of Marxism? Stateless society, right?
Yeah.
I still don't understand how throwing women into the big capitalist machine as a form of liberation helps get us to that.
It doesn't.
Then why would you? I still am confused why you support those things.
I mean, I don't support necessarily like what you're specifically saying. If I had my how do we transition from capitalism to communism is a different argument than how can women suffer less oppression under capitalism.
Yeah, but if you don't agree with those things, and first wave feminism was about liberation to participate in capitalism, then you don't support first wave feminism.
I don't like classifying feminism in terms of those waves because it just reduces it down to a singular idea where there are multiple sects of ideas. So yes, if you want me to say I don't agree, I don't agree.
Okay, but what are the prominent ideas then?
Sure. Yeah.
The prominent ideas were definitely...
I don't agree.
Yeah. So
if that's what you want me to say.
So then I don't know that you're a feminist at all, just a Marxist.
Well, I mean, have you heard of TERFs?
Yeah.
Would you say that's a form of feminism?
It's a very traditional form of feminism.
Yeah, I'm not a TERF, so does that mean I'm not a feminist? I feel this is like no true Scotsman fallacy.
No. I have to say there are prominent sects of feminism, right?
Yeah, you have radical feminism, liberal feminism, intersectional, Marxist.
Yeah.
So I'm saying
but
there
all
are
of them are
certain...
basing it around the liberation of women. Just the different ideas around the basis
just
of
like
the liberation of women.
There's capitalism,
Yeah.
which I'm sure we could define and
So
say there's different
first wave
functions
feminism,
of capitalism.
Yeah, so first wave feminism definitely wanted to liberate women so that they could have their own assets and go to work.
Correct.
There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that.
I mean, go to work, like women have always worked, especially poor and women of color. So I think like going to work is kind of maybe like a white-centered notion. I will acknowledge that I think in the early 1900s we had about 20% of women in the workforce, and then by like 1950 I think it was close to 50.
Especially at the post-World War II people who were staying in the workforce.
Sure, exactly.
But the thing
it
is,
depends on who you're counting
again,
as well.
Definitely first wave feminism was responsible for this. So the thing is I guess when you're talking about Marxist feminism specifically, you would have to kind of hate first wave feminism because it did
in
more...
a lot of notions I do, because I do think it ignored the material conditions of poor women, women of color. So yeah, I don't disagree.
Okay.
Just I'm sure you support capitalism, right? Do you like social democracy?
Well, I'm not sure that that's contingent on capitalism.
That is a capitalist mode, just like a laissez-faire free market would be. There's different ways that capitalism can be structured, and you can agree with one.
Yeah, but capitalism's an economic system. It's not as much of a political theory as Marxism.
I'm just showing how an idea can have different theory behind it.
Yeah, I'm not disputing that. I'm talking about the prominence of the ideas themselves.
Sure, I guess if I must not have understood. No,
Yeah.
I don't agree with some of the modes that liberal feminism or first wave feminism, as you've called it, have used.
So then wouldn't you agree with me then that it actually would have been more liberating for women to not have participated in first wave feminism but instead relied on their husbands? Wouldn't that have actually been more liberating than sacrificing them to the sacrificial lamb of capitalism?
Which is worse? I don't know. There's just so many metrics that you can evaluate when it comes to...
Well, this is the metric we're evaluating. So the metric we're evaluating is, my argument is, if women are dependent on their husbands and accrue no debt, only the husband can accrue debt, but women can still own assets, which they could. And they could still own property, which they could, even if they were married.
Right, but you're forcing a woman to link arms with a man. So if she's single, does she have access to these things?
As opposed to
if she's a
forcing her to
lesbian,
go to work.
Does she have these things?
Yeah, yes, of course.
How would you have these things?
How would they not have them? They were able to own property even unmarried. That's always been the history of the United States.
Well, right, but obviously then you would need to be in the workforce, correct? Because you need to purchase it?
You wouldn't need to purchase it. Oftentimes, your father would give it to you.
Oh, so just through, again, like
Yeah.
generational wealth.
Yeah. Which, by the way, first wave feminism destroyed a lot of that too. A lot of cross-generational wealth. But women could own property.
Sure. I mean, I would say, like, why would I have to pick one?
Because your choice is either you go to work, right? You either want equality or you don't want equality. So if the idea is I want equality, and that's what...
I think it would be more beneficial for women not to be dependent on men and to have more
Than
liberty.
to work within the capitalist system?
Yes.
Why?
Because they would have more control, autonomy, and identity.
They don't seem to have more control over either of or any of those things. Example, the identity of woman now in modernity is in question, period.
What do you mean?
What is a woman?
Oh, we're going there now.
Well, you just said women would have more identity. Because
yeah,
and
identity
more
in
autonomy.
terms of
But
if you're going to be dependent on a husband, then your labor is predetermined for you. Your identity in terms of being a wife and mother is predetermined for you.
Yeah, but the beneficiaries of that is that your accruement of debt is also non-existent, and so you can never
It's
be a
not
slave
really
to
non-existent because
capitalism.
your husband has it as well. So, I mean, there is still capitalistic threats.
You were not ever
and you don't
responsible
have-
for your husband's debt.
But you still suffer the outcomes if it doesn't work out, right?
Yeah, but you suffer the outcomes of that now under
Right, but
capitalism.
you would have more control and autonomy, right?
You don't
know,
seem
it's
to
either
have-
like you're
I
the
don't
captain
see
of
how
your own
women-
sinking ship, or you're just kind of
I
a
don't-
passenger on the Titanic.
Like you use these words, these kind of buzzwords, right? You say they have more autonomy. How do women have more autonomy?
Self-determination through choice.
What choices? Which ones?
Essentially, how they want to experience their life. Do they want to get married? Do they want to have children?
They had the option to do that before. They didn't have to get married. Most of the time, women who didn't get married stayed at home with their parents. By the way, right now, most women who don't get married, they often stay at home with their parents. Not a lot has changed in that department.
I mean, I haven't read any statistics that women who don't get married just stay home with their parents.
Yes, it's often the case that women who do
Is that
not
true
get
with men?
married stay at home with their parents. Yeah,
Because
it's
I think
often
single,
true with men
I
too,
think single
and it was
women
often true with men
home,
then.
I think single women home purchases are starting to outpace men.
It's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it
so
is
it
often
seems that
the
they're
case.
getting their own. They're getting their own house.
Sometimes, but you got to remember now, children are staying at home with their parents longer than
Sure. So
ever.
obviously, like the conditions that comes to capitalism now is different than it was, in the 1900s.
Yeah, so I mean, the thing is that I don't see how women actually have any more of these things. I don't see how they have any more autonomy. I don't see how they have any more actual choice. It just seems like an illusion of choice.
I would agree with you. There is some oppression within that choice, but I do think the choice is more.
Okay, and it's worth it to have this limited amount of autonomy in order to grind yourself in the capitalist system. Like if you were to ask the average woman, if you were to go back in time, hypothetically, and you were to sit down with first wave feminist, okay, who couldn't seem to get first wave feminism passed any other way than an amendment because women were voting it down all over the place. The question becomes, if you ask them, if we fast forwarded this to 100 years, I just want to let you know that your children will be living at home with you until they're 25. You will have access to college, but you'll have crushing debt, and chances are your marriage is going to fail. Chances are really good that your marriage is going to fail, over 50% perhaps, that your marriage is going to fail. But you'll have a little tiny bit more autonomy, but I won't even be able to exactly tell you how you have more of it. Do you think that they would go for that deal? Or if you said, hang on, or if you said to them, if you don't do this, your husbands will accrue all debt. You'll never have to worry about it again, and you can still make moral claims, and they'll be super effective, just like the temperance movement was, because now you're not political pawns.
I mean, I think you're kind of constructing the options in a way that would be beneficial to a specific narrative. I think I have cleared how you have autonomy. Like, would you want men to be dependent on women and have women be the predominant mode of production under capitalism?
I don't think it's possible.
But would you want that?
Well, I couldn't want a thing I don't think is possible,
Why?
because it's not possible.
Well, I mean, why is it not possible?
It's not possible because women are not capable of doing the same types of things that men are capable of doing.
Such as?
Inside of society enforcement.
Enforcement? So like police and
No, military.
military?
Military, policing,
I don't think
special
men really are.
services.
I don't think men really are capable of that.
I mean, the men have gone and fought global wars time and time again and won.
Yeah, and what outcomes do they have?
They win the war.
They suffer severe PSD. They have a hard time integrating into society. I mean, that doesn't seem like a natural
there's
condition for men to be subjected to.
There can be symptoms of violence, but remember, not everybody gets PTSD, even combat veterans. A lot of them don't have PTSD. Some get PTSD.
Right.
But not only that, that's a coping mechanism. It's going to be individualistic. Men are definitely capable of
But
extreme.
it is an outcome of being exposed
Only
to
for
extreme
some
violence.
people.
I could say that about women.
Yeah, you can, but the problem when it comes down to enforcement is that women can't do enforcement.
What do you mean?
So I'll give you the easy hypothetical.
Okay.
If all men tomorrow decide that women in the United States are slaves, are women in the United States slaves?
No.
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 Why wouldn't they be?
I think it would be
How could women stop it?
I mean, it would just depend essentially on like access to resources.
Yeah, men have the access to all the resources because they made you slaves.
Well, that's how women could like stop it.
Women couldn't
It would
stop
just be a fight over resources.
How come women can't stop it in Islamic nations then when they just go, okay, you're all slaves?
Obviously, within Islamic nations, they don't have access to specific resources.
Nobody has access to resources if men don't allow access to those resources. Nobody. Because men have a monopoly on force. That's feminist theory. Feminists understand that, even Marxist feminists know this, that men have a monopoly on force. So, in other words, if men collectively...
Under patriarchy, I agree.
No, under any hierarchy, they're going to need to have men as their monopoly on force. I'll give you an example. If tomorrow men decided to enslave all women would be enslaved. However, if tomorrow all women decided to enslave all men, they do not have the force doctrine and requisite necessary to do so. They could not do it. They just couldn't do it physically.
Within any context.
No.
So if women had access to all the drones, if
Nope.
women had access to all the water supply,
repairs them
if
all?
women had access,
We
if
repair
women
them
had
all.
access to, I mean, women can have the capacity to repair. I don't understand,
Okay, so here's what I would say. Let's do this experiment this way. If women had access to all of the firearms on Earth that exist, okay, and every weapon which exists, and they have access to all of that, they still don't have the requisite brute force that would be necessary to keep men under control. They just wouldn't. It wouldn't be possible to do long term.
What do you mean
Even
by
short term.
What do you mean by brute force? That they just
Men
wouldn't be
are-
able to pull the trigger?
No, that men are much, much, much stronger, and that
Sure.
guns are only an equalizer until men take your guns.
Right, and obviously they would have to get close enough. But I mean,
They
I don't
can.
care how strong you are if you don't have water and food. What
Well,
are
it's
you gonna
really
do?
simple then. Do you think that if you were the head of a prison, would you rather have all male or all female guards if you were dealing with dangerous prisoners, even if both had access to guns?
I mean, I guess it would depend what the goal is. I think
To keep the
women,
prisoners who are dangerous under control.
I mean, I think women can make really great police officers because they are less likely to use excessive force. They're more likely to de-escalate, where men are more likely to escalate.
More likely to get disarmed, more likely to get beaten up, more likely to accidentally shoot a suspect. They're more likely to do all sorts of things to the contrary as well. But there's also way fewer females who are in the police force because they can't meet the minimum requirements, which are necessary to be a cop. They can't meet the necessary minimum physical requirements. Same thing in the military. They can't
Well,
meet the
okay.
necessary minimum physical requirements to be in the infantry. Most
Okay.
women can't do it.
Right.
So men have a monopoly on force, and because of force doctrine, this ends up coming down to this idea. If it is the case, you say that women can do anything that men can do, I counter this by saying they cannot. They cannot do enforcement. This is uniquely a male thing. There are some women who can be introduced who can meet these standards, but on average they can't.
Well, I think if we're to kind of bring it to an analogy, if the fence is 6 feet tall and most women are 5'8", then yeah, of course they're not going to be able to meet that standard. So is the standard just specific to certain male criteria that?
Well, it would be the criteria of you need to handle a male. So if you're a female police officer, you need to be able to handle a male, right?
Yeah, but obviously, like, you have tools to aid in that. That's what I'm saying. Like, just because women aren't meeting these criteria,
Do you have to
doesn't
get
mean
close
that.
to a male when you're a police officer as a female in order to put, like, handcuffs on them, stuff like that?
Yeah, but you have, like, pepper spray and stun guns.
Yeah, and routinely women get disarmed, and they're routinely overpowered by suspects. Routinely. Happens often. And
Sure, and men often use excessive force, and then they're sued.
Yeah,
and then
maybe,
people
but
die.
when you
Like-
say men use excessive force, you're just demonstrating my point that men have a monopoly on force. Yes, maybe it's
No, I'm
excessive,
saying
but
a
they're capable of
propensity
using
to
it.
use force, sure.
No, they're just better at using force because they're much stronger. They're much stronger, they have much denser bones, so they're much more capable.
I don't disagree with that.
Yeah, so
the average male is stronger, sure.
Well, significantly stronger. It's not an insignificant amount between the average male and average female. Now, I want this point to drive home because it's often stated like, oh, yeah, there's this small marginal difference. No, it's a significant difference, 60, 70% in many cases.
Okay.
Much, much, much stronger. This being the case, men have the complete monopoly on force doctrine because they're much, much, much stronger. Just raw brute force, which if you reduce rights, you reduce society, reduce everything to its rawest principle, it's going to be brute force. I want to make you do thing. I always have this.
I don't agree because with violence there can definitely come consequences that are not desirable in terms of the outcome. Like if men wanted women to be slaves, who determines if the species goes on?
Men.
Women.
No, men, if you were slaves.
How?
The same way they did in Rome. They impregnated their slaves.
Well, but women could just commit suicide.
Yeah, why didn't they in Rome?
Well, wouldn't that just be black swan fallacy? Just because there's that one example where they did.
Oh, no.
I think
That's
to a
in every
specific degree.
Here, we'll give you every example. They didn't do it under Genghis Khan. They didn't do it in Rome.
Yeah, it would just be again a black
They
swan
didn't-
fallacy.
So,
But
that's not a black swan fallacy, by the way. But that
how would it not be? We just haven't seen it,
Tell
so
me-
therefore it can't
well,
happen.
Okay, so first of all, what I'm saying is I'm pointing to a historic standard.
Sure.
And saying the
I
historic
understand
standard,
that.
and I asked you a question. I didn't make a propositional statement, so that's why it can't be fallacious.
But I would say that ultimately it does come down to women. If she doesn't want to sustain pregnancy and is a slave, she does obviously have the opportunity to kill herself.
Yes, but
like
that
you
is-
can't have society continue.
I will say so I'll grant this. It is logically possible that all women who are enslaved can off themselves. Not disputing that.
Right.
However, it's also logically possible they do not, right?
Sure.
Okay, which one do you think is more likely then?
It would
that they
depend
do or
on
don't?
it would depend on so many different conditions.
Okay,
and
well then
contexts.
that's fair. So give me a single condition in which the female slaves of all of history have ever collectively offed themselves in order to prevent their own slavery.
Well, it wouldn't be to prevent their own slavery. It would be essentially to stop the the next generation. And even if
That
you
would
do
be
have
preventing slavery.
Sure, and even if you do have women who are enslaved.
Can you give me an example of a
No, I
single?
can't.
Because
No.
there isn't any. There's no example.
But I'm sure you wouldn't say that that's moral. That's
Moral
what men
what?
ought to do.
Well, I believe in objective morality. I'll make odd claims based on an unchanging standard, but you're a moral relativist. You can't be like, you can't do that. It's relative. It's
What do
totally
you mean?
relative. So is one set of morals of more value than another set of morals?
I think there are moral facts, if that's what you're asking me.
No, that's not what I'm asking you. I'm asking you if one set of moral particulars has more value than another set of moral particulars.
I'm not sure how to answer.
Well, I would just need to know for instance, we have one society over here that murders women and a society over here that does not murder women.
Okay.
Okay? Can you point to something objective that makes the society murdering women? There's some moral claim that you can make which is objective for why that's wrong.
Well, murder by definition is wrong.
No. Why would it's the unjustified?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And unjust mean
Unjustified doesn't mean immoral.
Well, it means wrong. If it's not just, then it's unjust, which would be wrong.
Okay. We'll rephrase that. They set the conditionals for something you would consider to be murder and say it isn't. It's the justified killing of this group of people here. you consider it murder? What makes their moral facts wrong?
I mean, obviously it would depend on reason and context.
So you can, with reason and context, determine which moral facts are correct?
I think you can have certain observations when it comes to the outcomes. I mean, that would be consequentialism. I think there can be moral facts in terms of there are things that are always wrong regardless of context.
Like
Rape.
Why would that always be wrong?
Well, rape would always be wrong.
Grape. Let's say grape.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, that was right.
Yeah.
Rape would always be wrong because it would because of the harm that it causes.
Yeah. Why is harm wrong?
Because harm is, I mean, again, I would say harm by definition is wrong, because it is an undesirable outcome within our subjective experience.
Okay, so are all undesirable outcomes immoral?
No.
Okay, well then, then you just contradicted your position.
Sure.
So then you can't point to a set of particulars, which are...
I think then, again, that would be kind of, based on, obviously, the scale of harm. I think if there's a certain degree
It wouldn't
of harm,
matter. If it is the case that nothing which is against your subjective experience that you consider harmful is bad, except by your own experience, then we're just back to relativism. It's
Sure.
like, yeah, you're never going to get past relativism. So I don't really know how you can make the claim that this is worse than that. But if you do, right, I'm just willing to grant that you have a principle and will adhere to the principle for the purpose of the debate so we don't bog it down with relativism
Sure.
versus non-relativism.
Okay.
We'll kind of just give you the out there because there's no reason to stay on it. But back to this idea of let's see, right before that, when we were diving into
your
force
Yeah.
and force doctrine. Yeah, so I would say that might makes. I'm not saying right. I'm not going to make the claim that it makes right, but it
Okay.
does make. And so I think that force doctrine is the necessary requisite for rights. It's the necessary requisite to have a nation. It's the necessary requisite to have anything. Is force.
I disagree because we could obviously agree on rights and have a cooperative
I
nature.
agree. We could agree on rights. And then if somebody violates the rights, what do we use?
I mean, I would be more towards restorative justice, as well as obviously centering the harm that the victim causes.
Both of those require force.
I can agree to some extent, but I don't think necessarily if rights violations happen, that what the punishment or what the outcomes is what one would deem justice. I would say the conditions to which society is to prevent harm would be the ultimate goal.
That would require force.
How?
Because if somebody violates any of your principles or any of your rights, how do you get them to not do that?
Well, I think rights violations happen for specific reasons within society. Like if you were to say you were to say that you violated my rights by coming in my house and stealing all my stuff, then if we're in a society of capitalism to where people are subjected to poverty and need access to material goods.
Okay, let's say we have communism. Communism can't exist without force. It's impossible.
Well, that's again like an example of how we would prevent rights violations, because I would say, like, if the right is violated, did you really have it to begin with?
Yeah, but you're baking into your hypothetical here, oh, you violated my right, and now we have done, and you did it based on some conditional of some externality that drove you to this.
Sure.
Right? Forget that, right? They just fucking want to. They just want to.
I think that's just a lazy presupposition.
That people just want to do things?
Yeah, to
So,
just want to cause harm. to just
Psychopaths
want
don't exist? Sociopaths, narcissists, these people don't exist? Or they do?
They do exist, but again, we're talking about what conditions they exist under, and those are very rare.
Okay, I'll even grant that it's rare.
Yeah.
I'll even grant that it's rare. Can you
But I
give-
don't think people are born psychopaths or
Can you
sociopaths. Again, I would say those are environmental conditions.
Okay, like what, nourishment?
Well, no, your brain is a social organ, and so it responds to your environment. I think they did a study where they analyzed, I forget how many serial killers' brains, but or serial unalivers, but they all had severe damage to the orbital region.
Well, I'd like to take a look at the data there,
Sure.
but was there a meta-analysis done on it?
I can't remember if it was a meta-analysis. I want to say it was, but I
Okay.
can't remember.
Well, in any case, it doesn't really matter. Ultimately, doesn't matter what society you live in. There's gonna be a prerequisite requirement for force, no matter what. Doesn't matter how. Like, could you even give me in a society in which that would not be the case?
I mean, it's hard to conceptualize in terms of, I think if we had a society based on technology, what do you mean by force? Are we just talking about like violence?
If you have a society in which people have any sort if you have any sort of laws or you have any sort of rights at all, then
Well, I agree with you that laws do.
the only thing which would create a prevention of the violation of said thing by a person would be the requirement of force. So if I want...
I mean, I don't know how force prevents rights violations necessarily in
It's
those
the only thing that
instances.
prevents rights violations.
I mean, well, if you're saying men have the monopoly on force, then that's instilled within patriarchy, then why do rights violations occur?
Well, no, that doesn't even follow. It would just follow that men are the only ones who could stop rights violations. I mean, at least in mass.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the only thing that would follow from that. It's like men are the ones in mass who would stop rights violations, which is exactly what happens right now. They are the ones in mass who stop rights violations.
I think when we talk about that too, like obviously the entity that is in control of force is also can commit rights violations.
Sure.
So
Don't disagree at all.
okay.
Totally agree.
So I don't think that the way to society and essentially to establish rights is necessarily through force.
The only way it can be, well, what happens if you violate somebody's right then?
I mean, what do you mean what happens?
Well, how do you stop them from doing that?
Well, they already did it. What do you mean, how do you stop them?
Well, okay. So I want to take over your country, right?
Why?
Are you just going to let me walk in and do that, or?
Well, I mean, why? And again, like, do you really have like the modes of production
Because I
and the
feel
materials?
like it.
I just don't think people wake up and just say, "I feel like doing this."
Do you feel like
motive
rapists
behind it.
wake up and feel like graping?
Wake up and feel like graping?
Like
no,
they
not
say,
necessarily.
today is the day?
No.
No?
No.
No? So, again, I'm actually really confused now.
I think
so
there are
you have-
instances, sure, where grape can be premeditated.
If we didn't enforce
but I
our
mean,
laws, are you saying people would break them more or less?
if we didn't enforce our laws,
Would people break them more or less?
I think it would depend on the law.
Any law.
I mean, do you not schmurder because it's illegal?
There's probably a lot of people that I'd like to
Well,
if it was legal.
I'm just asking.
Murder's fine, by the way.
Oh, okay.
So, like,
No,
you and I would have
do
a...
you murder? Do you not murder because it's illegal?
You and I would have a distinction in what we would consider murder to be, right? You and I would have a distinction in that.
What do you
so,
mean?
like, well...
I thought
like,
we agreed it's unjust killing.
Yeah, but what we consider justified to be would be different.
Okay.
So that would be where we would have a semantic distinction there, right? So, for instance, if somebody was
So,
stealing...
per the
hang
law-
on, I'll
okay,
explain.
go
so,
ahead,
like,
sorry.
someone is stealing property. Are you entitled to kill them?
I mean, per the law, sure.
No, but do you think morally?
Oh, morally?
Yeah. Like somebody's taking off with your TV.
Oh, no.
Yeah, see, I think dead, right? So you see, we have a distinction in justification.
Sure.
So you think that's murder. I think, no, it's not. So to answer your question, yeah. If the law wasn't there to say you can't shoot him
That's
if he's stealing your TV.
So you would shoot someone who is stealing your TV?
Yeah. In the face.
In the face?
Multiple times.
Multiple times.
Yes. Yes.
That's
With an Uzi.
a crazy place to plant your flag.
An Uzi.
Yeah. Or, whatever was convenient. Yeah. What's wrong with that?
I would say that the loss of their life certainly outweighs your TV.
Well, I mean, if the TV didn't like outweigh their ability to run, I probably would have missed, right? But the thing is you know what else would have prevented this? Them not stealing my TV.
That's true.
Is the context here, this is a home invasion?
Yeah.
Like it's in your house?
Yeah. Well, no, I
Well,
think you can. I think you have the ability to defend your property.
Yeah.
And that your
disagree.
property, anything that's within the domain of on your physical property, right? Meaning property you own. I consider that all to be the French word curtilage. And anything within the viewpoint of curtilage is a violation of your actual property and therefore a rights violation. You have every right to put that person down so that you don't encourage additional people to do it. So in many ways, I think you're defending not just yourself, but everybody around you if more people took that stance.
I think like the better solution would be to recognize why someone's stealing your TV.
Okay, yeah. So, but how does that prevent them from doing it? So, like, okay, we're investigating it now. By the way, we've been investigating why people steal shit for about 100 years, and you know what? We haven't really prevented people from stealing shit. But I'll just grant to you that we could.
Isn't it just scarcity, though?
I'll just grant to you that we could. No, people steal even when there's no scarcity. Bernie Madoff took off with how many people's pensions? There was no scarcity for him.
Well, I think capitalism creates scarcity even when there's abundance. That, it's never enough. You're
that
going to lose
sounds like a cope.
this.
So like Bernie Madoff, who had everything, just needed more.
Yeah. How many rich people have clearly enough money to live the rest of their life, not have to work, but still work?
Yeah, and how many women, right, who are living middle-class lifestyles steal for fun? They literally will steal things for fun because it gives them a thrill.
Sure.
And it's like, so there could just be the example of greed and the example of, I want to do this thing because I really like doing it. And it's
I think there's a specific reason behind certain psychological habits or impulses, if you will.
Sure, but you can't cure the human condition. You can't.
How do you know that's the human condition, though?
Because we've been dealing with greed, and we've been dealing with these problems, at least in the 20th, 21st century, even with the marching of science. We have not been able to just increase people's material positions in life, and then crime suddenly goes away. That element will always be there. Now, I think you can reduce it.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you can't reduce it. Like,
Right.
people in abject poverty do commit crime more. I'm not saying that that's not the case.
Sure.
What I am saying, though, is that in the interim time while you're trying to solve it, it doesn't change the fact this guy has my TV.
I never said it did.
Yeah, and so I see that as completely justified in blowing his face right off.
I disagree.
Why? Yeah, but why, though?
Again, I would say the life has more value than the TV.
Okay, let's see if you actually believe that.
Okay.
This would necessarily entail that his life had more value than any of your property.
What do you mean?
Well,
Why?
I mean, you're not going to put a number on his life, right? His life's worth more than all the money in the world, isn't it?
It's a man?
Woman.
Oh, then yes.
Yeah, fair enough. So this chick who wants to steal my TV, why can't she steal my house?
How would you steal someone's house?
You squat.
Squatters?
Yeah. And now you've stolen my house and you've put me and my family on the street. Can I blow you away then?
Can you or ought,
Should
or
you?
should you?
Ought you morally be able to?